Hey guys, it's Nanomachines, and today I have a little bit of a discussion video part deck profile kind of thing. I wanted to do a little bit of a discussion about Insecticons, and in that I'd like to talk about my Insecticon list and how I brought it to Origins. Now, you've probably already seen my Insecticon list a dozen times at this point, so I won't bore you with the details about all the intricacies of that. I mean, if you still want to see it, it's in the description below, so have fun. But I wanted to talk about specifically my sideboard and how that's going to be changing with the introduction of Wave 3 and how that will be changing Insecticons as a whole into Wave 3 and, of course, into Gen Con. Now, my Insecticon list was fairly unique in the fact that it had in its sideboard a bunch of healing cards. The main list also deviated from the norm because it also played as few blank pips as possible and as few dead cards as possible. It's not a techie list, it's a very redundant list, and I built it specifically for redundancy. And of course, flipping more cards on the top of your deck. Now that kind of brings me to my first topic, and that is the building philosophy of the deck itself, and that is, to be perfectly frank with you, kind of a big matter, and it kind of goes down to the understanding of the game concepts. Now, if you have an understanding of the game concepts, you know that the deck is both a support, in other words, like you draw cards from it, it supports your play, but it also is a resource. A resource is not just cards you play from your hand, but it's also the cards you flip off the top of your deck. Now, as it happens, deck as a resource is possibly the most important thing you could possibly think about in any given circumstance. It could be adding 2 to 3 more defense on your character at any given time, 2 to 3 more attack on your character at any given time. The deck adding to your stats is the most important thing to think about in the game. A lot of people think about it like Magic, where it's like, oh, these characters are just creatures I have in the field, and these cards I have in my hand are like my sorceries that I can just use to, and my enchantments I can use to buff them up. And that's not a good way to look at it. I really don't like that way of looking at it because it kind of cheapens your deck as a resource. Because not only does it mean that you're like kind of forgetting that you flip the cards out of your deck, but you also are forgetting that mills yourself. That prevents you from drawing into the vast majority of your resources. So if you play like, oh, I'm playing 3 of drill arms as a tech, you're never going to draw those. Or if you do, you're going to draw them at the wrong time. That's why green pips are so important. Really techie lists aren't going to get nearly the value out of redundant lists. They're going to be very inconsistent, and you're going to be milling almost all of your resources. I've seen a lot of Insecticon lists play one-shell stands, and I've also seen a lot of Insecticon lists play power swords, for reasons. Now, power sword, specifically, I've heard the logic of you're just adding, like, a blue pip to your deck and you're adding 1 more bold, so they essentially cancel each other out. And that's a cool way of looking at it, but the full way of looking at it is you can play a power sword and get +3 damage, or you can attack normally and get +0 damage because you happen to flip all of your blue. And that is really and truly how you really should look at it. Adding non-cohesive pips to your deck, even if it's a blank pip in terms of 1 shell stand, 1 shell fall, is reducing the consistency of flipping your cards. And it cheapens the deck as a resource, and it also cheapens, just in general, drawing your cards. Because, I mean, like, you could potentially top deck that. You could go like, oh my god, I drew into the 1 shell stand. Wow, I'm going to play this. It's super strong. Or you're never going to draw into it, and you only decrease your character's damage the entire game. How many games have you never drawn into your ISIL function? Exactly. There are going to be times where you just never draw into your 1-shells, and you just whiff them And all game, they are reducing your damage left and right. And that is what I sought to curb. Now, that said, I still do have ISIL function in there because that card is what I like to call broken. It's really nutty, and just in general, it's just a free attack, it's tons of free damage, and certain cards are just way too powerful not to play. But that said, I don't want to play more than just than that. Like, those 3 blank pips are as far as I'm willing to go. And they still bit me in the butt really hard, especially when attacking with Kickback, because I happen to flip like 2 of them per attack with Kickback. I'm like, wow, alright, guess I'm not going to draw these this game, and I guess I'm doing 2 less damage because I'm a scrub, I guess. You know, it's kind of silly like that. That's why I built my list as I did, where it is very redundant. Magic is a different game than Transformers. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a somewhat closer game, but still a different game than Transformers. Something that I've found is probably one of the closest in terms of mechanics, I would say, in terms of flow of play, it's Pokemon. Now, I've played a lot of Pokemon. I've played it for, I think one of the first dice I ever got at a tournament, I was after playing for a little bit, was a 2009 dice. That was an interesting time. So, Pokemon, you have a bunch of characters in the field, and you can increase those damage, the damage of those Pokemon. You can increase their attacks, and so on and so forth. And you can play 1 supporter card from your hand during each turn, and you can also attach things to your characters, like an energy, once per turn. It's a very similar flow in terms of that. And there's other ways to like cheat out a bunch of energy or cheat out a bunch of supporter cards even. But there's of course item cards, and there's a whole bunch of minutia that is completely different than Transformers. But deck building wise, it is very similar because you have that centralized flow. And that knowledge of that from playing Pokemon most of my life, I kind of ported that into my Origins list by making as many things as redundant as possible. Basically, I wanted to be able to, at any point in time, look at the top card of my deck and then play it. Sure, there's going to be points in time where you go, oh, well, that's an Improvised Shield, I can't play this, and you set it in your hand. But, more often than not, it is almost always going to be, look at the top card of your deck, say, huh, instantly play it. It is almost always going to be that. It is very straightforward. There's still a ton of nuance to it, but it is a very straightforward list that is very consistent. Now that brings me to my sideboard. And my sideboard, I had some interesting things in there. For instance, I had probably one of my favorite cards to play right now, Bad Attitude. Bad Attitude is a testament to don't judge a book by its cover. This is an incredibly niche card that helps in specifically one matchup out of all of them. Against aerial bots, this card is absolutely insane. You have, of course, it's a blank pip, and that's sad, but it is one of those incredibly powerful matchup cards that you just play. If you play one, you're gonna be pretty well set for a good majority of the game, because not only are you going to be activating Barrage for your opponent's entire team, but you are going to be healing their indirect damage, their direct damage, rather. Actually, no, their indirect damage. That's the correct word. Their armed hovercraft. They're going to play an armed hovercraft, and you're going to say, you activated my trap card, and just deny their existence. And going into Origins, that was one of my most feared matchups, was aerial bots, and Bad Attitude completely fixed that matchup, especially when paired with Repair Bay. Now, I also paired it with Emergency Repairs, but I barely got to use it. It's incredibly powerful against combiners, against double primes, because they only have like 1 or 2 attacks, and you can just like cheat out one of their turns away by saying, let me go ahead and steal 3, by the way. Hope you don't mind. Let me go ahead and say, oh, you attacked Skrapnel? Well, guess what? No, you didn't. Not last turn. And that's what makes healing so strong with Insecticons, is because of Skrapnel. But Repair Bay is another thing that entirely swings the matchup with aerial bots, because not only is it an orange pip, but it completely heals off whatever armed hovercraft damage they're going to be doing to you. And again, they're only been swinging for very low chip damage the whole game. So, which brings us to the final topic I want to get to, which is where it goes in the future, because aerial bots got a lot better. Not only do they have secret actions and a whole snot load of them to make their deck even better. Like, for instance, not only do they have access to black pips to give them pierce, but they also have access to things like Dampening Field, to Infiltrate, to Hiding Spot. I mean, even Battlefield Report. I mean, they have a ton of resources to make themselves even bulkier. And that makes bugs a little more nervous, because if they aren't getting valuable damage out, then what are they actually doing? I mean, at that point, they're just really frail. It's like, oh, I'm going to do 3 damage to you. It's like, okay. Power to you, my guy. I mean, like, if your Insecticon is swinging for such low numbers, then there's no point to them. You know? But defenses are going to be going up in the future, and I think it's going to be a more grindy, more pierce-based format, and I think that's a big, sad time for bugs. I think bugs are going to be definitely losing out on that, especially with Dampening Field just completely negating Kickback's existence, and, perhaps more importantly, Acid Storm. Acid Storm is very good against bugs, especially my list, which is very bold focused, where it like says, oh, well, let's play a Power Punch. Okay, let's play a Supercharge on Kickback. Well, let's flip half of our entire deck. When you have Acid Storm in the field, it reduces that effectiveness by quite a bit. And I think that is going to be making aggro a very play going into Gen Con, because they're going to be harder to play and harder to get value out of when someone can just sideboard in Acid Storm and laugh at you. Now, that said, it's not like Insecticons are wholly bad either, because they also got access to a lot of things themselves. For instance, they got access to Frag Toss. That was one of my big gripes with One Shall Stand, is that it didn't have a pip. And Frag Toss has a pip, and it does 2 damage to something. Of course, your opponent gets to choose, but it's still damage on the field, and it's just essentially just extra swarms in the deck, and that's really strong. Swarm is impossibly good, especially in this list where you barely play any non-orange pipped cards. And that as a whole is fantastic. Frag Toss is a very good card to play. Another thing that is really interesting you could play is, ironically, a card called Squish Them Like Bugs. Now, Squish Them Like Bugs is incredibly good against aerial bots, because you can swing at one of their characters and then do spread to literally their entire board, which is really, really strong. It's also really interesting against the mirror, because you can spread to their smaller characters like Chop Shop and Kickback. It's also really interesting against 3 wide primes, the deck's worst matchup, where basically, if they swing at you with Hot Rod, which is their turn 1 play, their turn 1 play is transforming Flame War and swinging with Hot Rod. That's their turn 1 play. So, they swing at you with Hot Rod, you get to swing into them with a Squish Like Bugs and do 1 damage to Flame War. And that is actually impossibly important damage that you would definitely take advantage of with Barrage the next turn. Now, That being said, Squish Them Like Bugs is still a situational card, and usually your opponent's going to have more stars than you. It's a sideboard card, but it's a cool sideboard card. Another card that they got out of this set is Heat of Battle. Heat of Battle gives all of your characters Bold 3 and all of your opponent's characters Tough 3. It's very good against aggro decks, because not only are you doing more damage to them, they're milling their resources for no reason. You're saying, oh, well, against my Insecticon brothers, you have a bunch of double orange in your deck. Oh, you have all these ISIL functions in your deck. Oh man, what am I going to do about those? Well, how about force you to mill them? You give them Tough 3, they're going to get 0 defensive value out of that. You're getting offensive value out of Heat of Battle, and then suddenly they flip their important cards and they can't play them. Naturally, decks reshuffle and they can potentially get into them later, but you are cutting them from their resources early, and that is actually very important in the mirror. When certain cards like Force Field, certain cards like ISIL Function can just swing back the flow back to them. And if they can't play those cards, then you're going to win. Another thing that you actually did get a kind of a look at into playing Insecticons is Bolster. Now, Bolster is a really interesting card. Bolster is one of those cards that I'm actually really surprised more people aren't talking about. It is honestly very strong. Not only, even though it is an orange pip, and that is kind of in decks like Insecticons, you can use it aggressively as well as defensively. Let me give you an example here. They swing at you, and you can defensively use it to play a force field onto one of your characters. Say they swung into Kickback for 1 billion damage. You have Bolster on the field. You get to attach a force field, and suddenly they cannot kill Kickback. And normally they'd be able to just play a Bashing Shield and say, be gone. They can't do that. Now that force field's going to stay there. And that means their attack is effectively negated. And it's an orange pip, so they can't actually get around it. So, like, in terms of later damage not going through. I mean, like, it's not a dead pip in your deck, is what I'm saying. You can also use it offensively. Since it attaches an armor, and Bashing Shield is definitely an armor, you can attach the Bashing Shield, get rid of their armor on their turn after they've already played it. And that means you can attach a weapon instead of a Bashing Shield during your turn, where you can then swing and take care of that problem character before their armor finds any value whatsoever, which is good. But it's also a +1 armor on your character, which means it makes you even harder to kill. And surprisingly, a lot of people aren't don't realize this, bugs are surprisingly hard to kill for certain decks, which is honestly why playing a Bashing Shield isn't necessarily a bad play in terms of defense. In fact, I've done it several times over at Origins to play a Bashing Shield specifically to get +1 defense, and it's made all the difference. Thank you so much for watching. I realize I haven't posted in a long time, and this is kind of going to be one of those really quick uploads that I kind of just throw out there. And I've been wanting to put together some deck profiles, but my playtesting on this format is not quite there yet. I can't in good conscience just throw out a deck profile for a deck that I'm not quite sure is optimized. I just can't do that. That's just, every fiber of my being pushes against it. That said, I have ideas, and in videos like this, where I'm just kind of proposing ideas, that's where I can kind of put on the tinfoil cap and say, but what if, and stuff like that, without just full-fledged going into deck profile. Now, I'm going to try to upload more often. My schedule's been a little bit wonky lately. I haven't had too much of an opportunity to make some videos. Hopefully, that changes in the future, where I can make more videos like this and talk to you guys more. But until then, I'm going to see you the next time. Thanks for watching, and make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.